These are recorded and uploaded to the NEMSIS YouTube channel, so that if you miss one of these, I know they're the highlight of your week, but just in case you miss one, you can pull it up on YouTube and use the timestamps to find those topics that you're interested in for your reference. So let's take a look real quick at this poll. We just wanted to get an idea of the your attitude towards the overall length for the annual meeting. We had a couple of suggestions come back on our evaluations, but we didn't ask it as a specific question. So I'm going to end polling, and I'm going to share results. Okay, that's interesting. So we had, it looks like we had 18 people participate in the poll, and we appreciate that. And this will be added into the YouTube video for this as well. So I'm going to take that out. Can you guys all, I haven't done these before. Can you guys all see the poll results?
Yes, yep.
Okay, yay. All right, so I'm going to take that off. So let's start with Clay. Clay's going to start off it's our August 28th NEMSIS V3 implementation call, and Clay is going to get us started this morning. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and let you have that, Clay.
Great, thank you. Let's see if I can get this shared. Okay, we get the NEMSIS website up. All right, can folks see my screen?
Nope, not yet.
Here we go. How about now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. I was asked just to speak briefly on what we've done to help promote and educate folks about the idea that version 3.3.4 has been extended. Folks remember during the NEMSIS meeting that was held here in Salt Lake City this spring, there was a request among the state directors to keep 3.3.4 version of NEMSIS open for an extended period of time. It was scheduled to close September, so just next month, and that has been extended to March of 2021. Wanted to just show you how you could share this information with your vendors and other stakeholders in your state. So on the NEMSIS website, there's really two locations to get to the updated timelines. One is here looking at the V3 Canada release, that hot button that we put there. Also, you can go to the bottom and here's the revisions to 3.5. It'll take you to the same place. We'll make some modifications to how this looks at the end of September when the Canada release closes. Go down to when will these changes take place, and you'll notice that we've updated all of these visuals of the versioning schedules and timelines to show that 3.3.4 will actually close in March of 2021. So there's three different kind of visualizations of the rollout of versions for you to take a look at and really help explain this process to your users. You can see here the lifespan of the versions, and so with this change, 3.3.4 will be open for a total of 7 years, and 3.4.0 is open for a total of 8 years. So that's where you can find the updated kind of timeline visualizations to share with your stakeholders. The actual letter announcing the extension of the closure of 3.3.4 is also found on that site. Here's a letter from Dr. Kramer, and that's also available to you. So, Julie, I'll turn it back over to you. Any questions about the changing and the closing of 3.3.4? All right, I will turn the screen back over to you.
We're going right back to, let's do that on screen one. Okay, we're going right back to that same main page where Clay showed you where the timeline was. And if you go to about halfway down this page, you can get to the software vendor news. So this is where we have put some of the annual meeting resources If you click on more, it's going to take you to the page for a 2019 annual meeting. Most of you, if you attended the annual meeting, you would have received an email with the PowerPoint slides as a single package, and also the boot camp presentation binder with lots of good information in there for details on NEMSIS. So those are now available to everyone, whether or not you attended the annual meeting, and you can just download those directly from resources under software vendor news. So that is where that item is at. I'm going to show you, let's do one more share. We also have the public training calendar has been developed for the rest of the year. So for the final quarter of 2019, 4 different topics. These were the high interest topics for public training that we received feedback on. And I will send this out. I'll send this out to the Google group so that you guys all have this. We'll also post it on the website so that you can have reference. Print it, share it, however you want. You can use the QR code down here, and this will add all 4 to your calendar. If you use the QR code, feel free to just jump on or promote the ones that are of most interest to your agency or to where you are in your data collection process. And we're having the different experts address each of these issues, and there will be time in these trainings for question and answer. So if you've got specific concerns, feel free to email those to us ahead of time, and we'll make sure they get addressed, or bring those questions with you, and there'll be time during that discussion to have a little bit more smaller group discussion and training on those issues. Are there any questions on the annual meeting resources or the training calendar? Okay. The other exciting news that we have is that the V3 State EMS Data Cube is now available. So you can go to, right, we're gonna start from the very beginning. So if you're on the main page, State Data Managers, and you can, right there, State EMS Data Cube. So if you're a state data manager, you have a login and password to the data cube. Please let us know if you're not able to access that or have any issues with that. If you are not a state data manager, then that information needs to come through your state data manager. And there's a process for that as well. So are there any questions on accessing the State Data Cube? And the V3 data is up, it's ready, you can dig through that, and the navigation of the cube is really good as well. So that's an exciting piece for your availability of all the great data that you've been sending in. Are there any questions on State Data Cube? Okay, let's go ahead and go to Monet. I'm going to go ahead and let you take the screen, Monet. She's going to spend a few minutes with us talking about state support benefits.
Julianne, do you see my screen?
Yes, I can see the PowerPoint.
Okay, now you should see, let's see. You see the presenter view?
I do not see the presenter view. It's just the slide.
How about now?
Nope, it's still just the slide that says NEMSIS state support.
Okay, that's the one I want you to see.
Okay, that's the one we can see.
All right, perfect. Okay, hello everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, fantastic. I want to take a few minutes to show and tell you exactly what I'm doing and what I'm working on with the state data managers. And I will also let you know that the state managers may be contacting you for specific answers to questions that I am requesting from them. So we're working to support the mission and the vision of NEMSIS and the NHTSA's Office of EMS, and that is that EMS systems nationwide will collect and make available for use all relevant data for the purpose of ensuring the best possible patient outcomes. So I'm asking for your help in the following areas. So here's a specific list of things and topics that I mentioned during my bi-monthly calls with the state data managers. So we're talking about the data use agreements, updating those. Some states may have an IRB that we also need to renew every year. We also talk about the state data dictionaries, the transition information, onboarding process, the state data set files, consecutive data submissions, and then we have issues with some DIM files that I'll go into as well. I'm only mentioning the DUA to emphasize that our data use agreements are with the state, and I will always contact the state managers first when addressing issues related to state data. I realize that some vendors may want me to contact you directly and have asked that I contact you prior to contacting the managers, but I want you to understand our process and allow for the full participation of state managers to help them understand and also address the concerns. Now, this is a screenshot, and I'm looking for the state V3 data dictionaries. You can see this information on the V3 state assets dashboard. In some cases, when I'm asking for this information, managers will indicate that the data dictionaries will be provided by their software vendors. And so I would just like to verify that this is true and that some of you may or may not be working on these particular documents. As you can see here, we only have 17 states that currently have a data dictionary. We currently have 44 states that are submitting to NEMSIS. So it would be really helpful to get those data dictionaries included for the resources.
Does that include states that are just using the plain NEMSIS dictionary?
Yeah, I would like to address that. I have started a process where I've been doing sort of a template data dictionary for states. I have pretty much used their information. If a state has submitted their state required elements in the state data set builder, then I have used that information to complete sort of a template document. But what I'm noticing is that when I read other state data dictionaries, there's so much more information about the way that the state managers intend for those elements to be used. And so with my template document, it doesn't address those type of specifics related to the use of the data elements.
So if a state doesn't have any custom elements and it's pretty much adopted NEMSIS straight across the board, we're still going to need to turn in, I mean, we haven't changed in California, we haven't changed anything. We've left it completely following NEMSIS right down the line. Is there a mechanism to just indicate that for now?
Yeah, and I think what I'd like to do for some of the states that are in fact using the National Data Dictionary, I can send a copy of that template document that I've created to the manager and maybe also copy the vendors that are responsible for those states. And if you approve that particular document that I've created, then we can post that as a holding spot for these data dictionaries that are missing. So I'll put that as, go ahead.
I have a question. So once they change and add rules making requirements of different fields, they may not have changed anything within the elements themselves, but changing the rules. And I know that doesn't affect the state data set necessarily, but other than listing like facilities if they require facility code. But wouldn't that affect the data dictionary if they've adjusted the rules even a little bit?
Yeah, and Jen, I think what you're talking about is an excellent point, because I have seen very specific details in certain state data dictionaries, and there's some variation in how these data dictionaries are coming in. Some are providing maybe an Excel sheet that just indicates what elements they're collecting. Some have gone through some really detailed, you can tell they're having internal discussions and really outlining how they want those elements to be used in the state. I think the more details that can be provided in the data dictionaries would be really helpful. But again, I can work with each state on an individual level regarding how they want their data dictionaries to look and be presented to their EMS stakeholders on both the local and national level.
This is Mark again. So just for clarification, should we invest any time in 3.4, or should we just wait and make this all be 3.5? Because it seems to me like the effort and concentration should probably be on 3.5.
Yeah, Mark, that's a good question. I think that's all about individual choice. I know that there are still questions coming about the usage of certain elements, and I feel like anytime you can provide clarification on the way you intend to use the elements, or help with the quality of the data that's coming into the state, it would be advantageous to do so. So if you choose to do it for 3.34 or 3.40 or 3.50, I think that's a personal choice in each state. I'm just pretty much trying to show what we currently have in place and what we're missing. And again, these are all going to be individual conversations about how we can get this information completed. Can I go to the next slide, or do we want to continue on this? Let me go to the next slide, and then we can have some additional time for questions at the end, if that's okay. Okay. So a couple of years ago, we provided state managers with a questionnaire regarding their version 3 transition plan. And as you are aware, the information is documented on the NEMSIS website. So anytime you go to a state page, you'll see this section here that says State V3 Implementation Timeline. Now, I'm contacting all states, but I'm also currently specifically contacting those states that are not green, so that we can get them and their data to the national level. Pretty much my plan is to help states to stay on track with the plan that they develop. So if they say they're going to go live on a certain date, and that they'll be submitting their data to the TAC, then that's the dates that I'm currently working with. So please know that these state managers will be contacting you for a variety of information to help them be successful in their transition plans. Okay, I added this slide because I just wanted to add a little fun to my presentation. So I used to play basketball. I also have 3 sons that I coach through basketball. And with any great coach or team, you have a playbook. So I have a current playbook. I'm very grateful to our good friend in New Hampshire. He has a document that is extensive as it relates to the items that he has put in place, or the specific tasks that has helped him to submit his data to the NEMSIS TAC, and all the things they had to do in the state. So we have a playbook that helps managers understand this process. I also help them create their Active Directory accounts. We preview the dashboards, and we actually talk about many other things as it relates to understanding the process. So I just want to let you know that we have several new data managers this year, and some who are seasoned but not submitting to the TAC yet. We have new managers, and they may be submitting, but then we have seasoned managers that are not submitting. And so the onboarding process is going to be different for each person because everyone's at a different level of understanding of NEMSIS and the role of the NEMSIS TAC. So the goal is to provide specific assistance where it's needed. And I'm just asking for your patience as we all take this journey together. This is a screenshot of also that V3 state asset dashboard, and I'm currently working to complete the state data set with managers. And in some cases, they will inform me that this work is also being completed by the vendor. So this is one request that you may receive from states that we're still looking for the state required elements. You can see here that we only have 17 states that have completed procedures. 18 states have indicated what medications they're administering or their medication list, and then 14 states have added their protocols, 39 states, agencies, and 34 states have added their facilities. So I just want to say that another opportunity for us to contact, to be in contact with the vendors is related to when the files that we receive from a vendor are not valid. And so there is definitely a question about how would you like us to work through this process with you? Would you prefer that we contact you directly? Would you prefer that we work with the state managers? We are basically trying to also complete this information as part of the onboarding and part of the process. Okay, this report is part of the state data submission summary dashboard that is pushed out to state managers every week on Tuesday mornings. And one of the concerns is that we're still getting indicators of failed submissions at the national level. We have to improve in the area of getting all the licensed agencies submitting, and you're more than likely to get questions from your managers on these topics. If I see that a state currently has all these boxes that are red, more than likely I'm going to be contacting them and asking them to, you know, just asking questions about what assistance can we help provide that would help get their agencies to submit. There's a number, the denominator is the licensed agency, the numerator is the active agencies, and sometimes not even half the agencies are submitting compared to the number of licensed agencies in the state. Now, I do have some good news, and I would like to congratulate the states and the vendors because we did receive a substantial number of additional DIMs that came into the warehouse on Sunday. So this first screenshot here where it says EMS agency demographic submissions by home state, you can see like Texas, for instance, submitted 439 additional DIM files. And so that's going to help quite a bit. But you'll also see that in this same dashboard, we have the EMS agencies that are missing demographic files. And so we had nearly 107,000 records that failed to come into the NEMSIS warehouse as a result of missing demographic information for their agencies. So this is an obvious act, but we would like you to please help continue to fix these type of DIM file related issues. This is a list that we have pretty much used to show some of the managers the more commonly missed elements, and these are mandatory elements. There are about 35 required and mandatory demographic elements. Sometimes the managers don't know which elements are missing or how to get this information, so it's very helpful if there's something you could do to help them with this process, or if you have a dedicated staff that could help them through this process. One of the things I do appreciate in my conversations with managers is some states have decided to send this and make this the responsibility of the agency managers, but other managers have said that it's quicker and it's less agonizing for them to simply enter all the information for their agencies. So however this is done, we just need to continue to work on this. Another issue is that when managers are fixing these demographic issues. They sometimes have issues resubmitting them successfully to the TAC. Recently, this past week, we've come across issues where we need the request handle in order to help find if the agency information is in the warehouse, and managers don't know how to find that information. So just additional assistance in this area would be greatly appreciated. Now, this is a sneak peek of my spreadsheet that I'm using when I'm contacting the state managers. And I would just like you to know that we submit our reports to NHTSA regarding the status of states' progress or the lack of progress, any barriers that the states are having, et cetera. NHTSA is interested in identifying ways to help states become more successful. So my ask for both the vendors and the state managers is to please be responsive to my attempts to contact you. All right, now this is another time to celebrate the great work that we're doing. This screenshot represents the results of communication between the TAC and the state managers and vendors. So thank you very much. This view is a composition of the NEMSIS warehouse as of Sunday, the 25th. Many states have surpassed prior year submission totals. And so kudos to all the stakeholders who are ensuring that consistent data submissions are received in the NEMSIS warehouse. You can see that Alaska, for example, is at 224% above previous years in terms of their submissions.
Monet?
Yes?
We've got a question. How are you determining the number of licensed services in a state?
Okay, so recently the CDC sent us an email requesting that we provide this information to them for the 2020 Healthy People Emergency Preparedness project that they have. And I called every state, I emailed every state, and I requested that they provide this information to me. So these numbers I'm getting directly from the state managers about what number of licensed agencies they have. And in some cases, the number of licensed agencies, there were some discussions. For instance, tribal lands are not included in that number. So even if a tribal or police agency might be licensed to do certain things, but they may not be included in that total number. So what we're saying is we are looking for the number of agencies that should be submitting data to NEMSIS. And if there are pilot agencies that have rolled into other agencies, then they would be considered one agency rather than maybe 3 or 4 different agencies. So these numbers specifically came from each manager.
Are you differentiating between 911 and IFT, transports, air, all those different ones, or just they're all lumped together?
Each state manager determined how they would like to categorize their licensed agencies. I did not make that distinction for them. They pretty much provided to me what number they consider a licensed agency that submits data to NEMSIS. So it could have been air for many, like again, this was a personal decision by each state manager.
Thank you.
Okay.
Monet?
Yes.
Would you be willing to share in PDF form the charts that you are showing? That's a request.
Sure, I believe we can do that. There's nothing, this is all public information, unless Clay has any objections to that, but we can discuss that after the call, and then we'll see what we can send out.
Thank you.
Okay. And then my last slide simply says, I just want to let the vendors know about the conversations I'm having with the state managers, and I have informed all state managers that the train is moving out. I'm actively encouraging all of them to get on board. So if there is a state that hasn't had any progress over the last year, their colors on the state map haven't changed, they just should expect to hear from me, and that we will put together a plan of how to make some progress. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now unless there's any additional questions.
Hey, this is Dan. I have a couple of questions.
Okay, Dan.
The state data dictionaries,
Uh-huh.
have you written any documentation or kind of guidelines on what you expect to be in a state data dictionary? And or, I don't know, I see where
Yeah.
Mark is coming from. Like if they have not extended the National Data Dictionary at all, like what do you guys see as the purpose or benefit of them putting a bunch of time into it?
No, I totally hear you. Julianne, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and give the screen back to you. Excuse me. And Julianne, can you go to the NEMSIS website?
Sure can.
I don't know if Mr. Cooper is on the line. Let me look real quick. Go ahead and go to the state map. I would have to say that let's go ahead and click on New Hampshire. The reason I am going to pick on Mr. Cooper real quick is because he has actually, when I speak to Chip, I inform him that he is seasoned and he has been very instrumental to the process, that if he could serve as a mentor to other new managers, would he accept his role? And I believe that he agreed that, you know, he could share some of his expertise. But go ahead and click on his state data dictionary. So, I mean, this document is 444 pages, but if you want to pretty much look through some information on this page about how they have developed their data dictionary, I think this would be a really good example. You could just continue to scroll down a few pages. I want to, let's see. So what you'll see here is they have identified each element, and then when you go to a specific page, just go to any page where they have described the element.
All right, let's go.
Okay, so the way that they created their data dictionary is really very similar to the way that we create the National Data Dictionary. But what I've seen in some of the state data dictionaries is that they have added additional language in the data dictionary that helps to inform their local agencies about how they want this information documented. And I think that what we've noticed is that where states have provided additional information, we see maybe less of the warnings. The quality of the data is a little bit better in terms of we just don't see as many errors with some of the data or some of the warnings that come in for certain states. So there are definitely states, if you want to go back to that asset dashboard, you can look at any state that has a state data dictionary. So Julianne, go to view reports.
Did that click in New Hampshire?
No, go to view reports on the navigation tab and then go to state reports. And then go to V3 dashboards. And then go scroll down and go to assets, V3 assets. So it's this one, yes. And then go ahead and click on the bar that says data dictionaries. And once you scroll down, you'll see the states that have data dictionaries. So you can click on any of these states that currently have a data dictionary and look at their data dictionary and just get some ideas about how they've completed their data dictionary and what additional information you may want to include. But again, I have created templates for several states, but they only list the elements that the state is collecting. There's no additional information about how that state intends for that element to be used or any additional instruction. Okay, Dan, did you have another question?
Yeah, the in the state data set for protocols and meds and procs by cert level, there's a fair number of states that don't mandate that at a state level, and that's why they're blank in the state data set. So just wanted, like, one of the slides you breezed through had a grid of things that were missing, and you had those in the grid. So I don't know if you want a different kind of question or something in the state data set where they would actually say, like, no, we don't collect these, versus you assuming that because it's empty, they haven't filled it in yet. Does that make sense? So
yes.
You're never going to get to 50 on those. By the way you're measuring it.
I'm going to defer that response to Clay, because Clay, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and we maybe ought to come up with a different process here where we can identify those states that just choose, for example, not to have statewide protocols or statewide medication mandates or procedure mandates. That's clearly true that many states don't. So maybe some different approach to doing that would be helpful. And then also, I think related to Jennifer, Dan's, and Mark's comment about the data dictionary, maybe we can look at developing some guidelines that just ensure that while you're building a data dictionary, if there are rules or patterns or something where you're kind of walking away from the NEMSIS standard, it would be good if those were somehow identified so they could be easily kind of identified and taken into account by vendors and by users. So really good comments.
Well, you know, I think one thing we have to also keep in mind is that one size does not fit all. You know, a state that has a single system for it is going to look totally different than somebody like, say, California or Texas, where we've got, you know, other agencies that help manage or local control. And so it's not going to be the same. And we just have to be aware of that.
Yeah. Right, any more questions about Monet? I think you were at the end of your presentation, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Any more questions for Monet or about the process that she follows with states? All right. All right, Julianne, do you want me to share now? Am I kind of next? I think I'm next on the list, right?
You are, and if you're willing to, would you speak for just a minute about follow-up from the annual meeting?
Sure, happy to do that. Could I go ahead and share?
Yep.
Yeah, great. Wanted to give people an idea of what progress we've made in regards to the work groups that we held during the meeting in Park City. There were 5 areas of interest where we were looking to handle some of the practical issues associated with implementation of these attributes of the NEMSIS standard. And folks will remember in the agenda, I'm just showing that quickly here, that there were 5 topics ranging from the National Schematron file use, the DEM file, use of UUID. There were 5 total issues that we kind of went through in great detail, and we're looking for kernels of things that we could do that would actually smooth implementation as we move into 3.5. Great discussions during the separate meetings for state officials and for vendors, and then when we came together. This is just a brief draft sheet that we're kind of putting together right now as we deal with the issues, the kernel of things that we found that could be helpful to facilitate implementation. So I just wanted to share this with you real quickly. There are several columns here you can see. I really just want to concentrate on column A and column B. I want to make sure today that we have all of the topics that you thought were important for us to follow up on listed in column A and column B. Then we'll build out what are the potential deliverables associated with those and action items and get those assigned. But just want to make sure that we didn't miss anything. We of course took notes on screen and on the whiteboards, and we've transcribed that over and had some initial discussions, but have had a lot of folks that are finishing up their kind of summer vacation, so we haven't had time to really kind of move forward in big ways. But I think what we plan to do, we have 5 topics. We'll begin next call with working through each of the topics on our implementation calls and sending out information prior to the call so you can be prepared for the topic, and we'll just work through those. We'll cover the topics that have potential changes to the standard first, because of course we want to be able to close and finalize version 3.5 by the end of September to stick to our schedule. So if it's okay, I'm just going to really briefly walk through each of these 5 topics and I just indicate the things that we caught that we need to work on that will help with facilitation. If there's something that we're missing, please let me know and I'll record it here. So in regards, there was a meeting or a topic of enhancing the national schematron file was the title of the topic. Our kind of takeaways were to add an effective and close date to the schematron as well as to the state data set. We'll talk about the state data set in just a moment. Develop a national schematron test suite. So we've had some initial discussions about that. Really, vendors were asking that because it could help them with the development of a state testing process as well. So that was an ask. There were 2 kind of educational asks that we'll try to build some materials to support. One is to educate states about the idea of how helpful it would be if they had schematron files ready 90 days in advance of their release date, just so that we can ensure that there is a true kind of synchronization across their state with the date of implementation. Also, to provide some educational information regarding, for example, how to handle facility names and facility codes in the state data set. Why that's listed here under schematron, I'm not exactly sure, but we could clearly build some schematron rules that could kind of help to ensure that we have consistency across the names, but there are issues associated with that.
Hey, would you pull up really quick just to show the rest of line 3? So we had a question on B3, so just keep going up a little bit.
Oh, sure, line 3. Oh, right. there, yeah.
Oh, because it ends, the formatting cuts off the rest of that. So it says to specify what comes after the, do you see where that is in B3?
In V3, no. Which column are you looking in?
Column B, and it's row 3. So it's just an incomplete sentence. Okay, there's the rest of it.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
Specify what comes after the underscore. Okay, so that was just a question.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. All right, let's move on to state data set. So again, as I just mentioned, I provide an effective and close date for the state data set. There was an ask to develop a more kind of formal communication path between the states and agencies when a state data set changes, just to ensure that they're informed if they change the name of a facility, for example, was a great example of why this could be helpful. Develop a standard implementation of a state data set for collect data systems to follow. This was tied to the idea that the theoretical idea behind the state data set was to add a lot of value to local implementations of NEMSIS data, so they could really use the state data set to look at protocol adherence, certification adherence as they're performing procedures, medications, lots of good uses that we really haven't built into our systems yet. So perhaps some kind of diagrammatic use cases as to how we expected the state data set to be used in collect systems could be helpful. And then there was a really strong discussion about how we're going to test for compliance for acceptance of a state data set. There were some great comments, and we're working through those, and I look forward to that discussion on the V3 implementation call when we cover state data set. Anything associated with state data set that were kind of major kernels that we haven't captured here for those who attended? Okay, we also had a group discussion regarding the DEM file. The title of that discussion was Solving the Agency DEM File Submission Issue. So there was an idea of perhaps putting together best practices for states that have done a really fantastic job of bringing their agencies on. California is a good example of that. Nebraska is a good example. There's a number of other states that have really done a great job of bringing DEM files in for their states. And so we could develop a best practice document there. Row 6 is just kind of a comment about how some systems allow state data managers to configure the DEM elements. We could develop use cases for the DEM file just to incentivize individual agencies to get their DEM files completed or states to submit their DEM files. There was an idea, could states reject EMS files if there's no DEM file from the agency, or could we clean up a way where they could have a push contact to agencies who submit an event file that don't have a DEM file? So we'll work on that. And that's related to the ID in 11, row 11, that could there be an API that kind of tells agencies that we haven't received a DEM file yet. So we'll continue to work on those ideas that are related to a NEMSIS TAC deliverable that could be helpful. But any other major ideas that were discussed at the meeting in regards to the demographic file and its use that we haven't captured here? Okay, for e-outcome, really the idea here is not a new one. We've been discussing this for several years. Really, there's been some barriers to moving forward just because we weren't having kind of national support here as to the other side of the handshake for receiving e-outcomes data back into the patient care report. But that support is growing, so we're going to try to really move forward under 3.5 with this. So the idea was to develop a new and separate NEMSIS structure for the e-outcome section that sets separate from the EMS data set that could be linked back to an individual patient care report using the UUID, and then to develop a universal implementation guide for outside users. And it remains a question as to whether that implementation guide would be HL7 version 3, which is what we've done in the past, developing CDAs and consolidated CDAs for the export and movement of data, or whether we ought to move to FHIR now, which is a new, different kind of a implementation rather than document-based. It's kind of message-based, and would that be valuable to make that move? So we'll hold those conversations as we begin to talk about the outcomes section. Again, are there major thoughts associated with the outcomes that we didn't capture here? Okay, finally, just the UUID. There was a call for us to develop really a business value proposition and use cases for states and for vendors to understand how UUID can be used to benefit both local agencies and, to a more limited extent, the states with the use of UUID. There's really a limited number of things that UUID helps with, and there's really a strong tendency for scope creep with this idea. And so there was a strong call at the meeting to make sure that we only implement UUID now as defined in the draft white paper that was distributed for the meeting. So we'll continue to try to develop materials that deal with that strict implementation as it's in the white paper. We're also talking about testing for the import and export of UUID and what we would do when when an EMS agency switches a vendor, and how do we pass along the UUIDs within products for that agency so new ones are not generated and sent to the state. That will be a lively discussion, I'm sure, as we work through those issues. And then there was this idea of perhaps reducing the number of instances of a UUID just so it's not confusing. So there is a way to maybe remove UUID from the demographic report element and some others that may not really add a lot of value, but it may add great value to add the agency UUID into the header of the demographic file. So we'll talk about those attributes of UUID and see if we can tighten it up a little bit. So any missed thoughts or ideas that were brought up at the meeting regarding UUID?
Hey Clay, this is Dan.
Yeah, Dan.
I don't remember talking about removing UUIDs. I'm a little concerned about that comment.
Yeah, that's a good thought, Dan, and maybe I've extended there too far the discussion. I know when we came back from the meeting and immediately had many hours of discussion about what was brought up, and maybe that was something that was just born out of our discussions as we were kind of going through the complexities of the discussion. So yeah, I'll backtrack on that a little bit. Maybe right here where we're talking about the removal of UUID from the demographic report element, maybe we'll have to dig back into that a little bit as to why we did that, and I can see that we made a comment to be sure to discuss this on the implementation call. So yeah, this was probably a decision that was just made as we tried to go through.
Okay, so just to reiterate, having those in the DEM file solves a lot of state level problems with duplication and uniqueness. So unless other people on the call remember us talking about it and it was about something else, otherwise, yeah, just keep us updated, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And here's the UUID we're talking about, is the one that sits right here. So you're right, Dan. I'll make a point that when we discuss this on the call, that this was not discussed at the meeting, and okay, we'll see if we. Yeah. Thanks, Dan.
And that might be a weird place for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good call. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Great. Thanks, Dan. Any other comments about the overall issues that we'll just be discussing on the calls as we move forward? We will try to really have this very well kind of flushed out so that we can have very focused discussions. We'll send this out kind of ahead of time for the call, so you have a good idea of what direction we're going with it, with each of these ideas, so there can be good focused discussions. Any other comments about the work group meetings held in Park City a couple weeks ago? Okay. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Julianne. Do you want to take the call back, the screen back? And I think we're now at the point in the agenda where we can introduce some guests who are joining the call with us. Kate and Arpan are on the call from CMMI. There were a number of post-meeting questions that they had and wanted to bring up. They're listed on the agenda here on the right side of your screen. Kate is the one that's leading the development of the data collection process for ET3. So she was the main speaker on a call that Skype call that we had during the meeting, where she could collect some additional information from vendors about how best to structure data collection for the for evaluation of the ET3 project. There were a number of follow-up questions that Kate wanted to discuss. Arpan is joining the call as well. Arpan will be kind of dealing with the management of the ET3 project, so great to have Arpan on the call as well. So Kate, can I turn the discussion over to you? Is that okay? And then we will try very hard.
Okay, Clay.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
You bet.
So, hello everyone, and also thank you for having me on this call. The items that you were talking before then were very interesting and useful, and hopefully I can be included in these calls going forward because it was educational for me. So again, thanks. So I would like to start off with the questions that were asked at the conference and that we're so kind of looking for and answers for, at least thoughts on, so that as we're designing and developing the data collection system, that we're aligning to the work that you're doing already, and that we have a good understanding so that when we have the data, that we're managing it in a way that makes the, the model activities successful as well as effective and efficient. So on the first one is, I'm hoping, suspecting that some of you are out there are doing probabilistic matching to get to like a single patient for billing purposes or other, analysis. And along the lines of lining up, we just wanted to know if anybody would be willing to share their approach. And obviously not the code. I totally understand that's proprietary or, other matters, but just sort of like the, like I said, just the logic, the business rules, anything that would kind of help us go in the right direction, so that for those agencies that are participating in the model, when they see the data, that they can have confidence that what we're reporting and what you're providing align. So is anybody willing to share?
Just we aren't doing it, just so that you get somebody at least speak back to you. We aren't doing it.
Okay. And actually, and Clay, if you would not mind, because it's like I hate putting people on the spot. If there's anybody who is participating on this call or anybody that they might know that would be willing to assist, could they contact you?
You bet. Would be happy to take those requests.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Like I said, it's like we ideally, because we want to align, but if not, we'll figure something out. So the other one, which I think headed to the answer might be no, or we don't, is if anybody would be willing to share any of their billing data to sort of help us, not like payments or anything like that, just anything that would be helpful for us to make sure that if we have a J patient, we have several J patients, that we're only tracking the, applicable, the appropriate J patients. And we're not tracking multiple of the same individual. Okay. Again, if you want to kind of think about it or get a hold of Clay, would really appreciate that. The next one, hopefully this one is something that individuals could share. Are there, peak volume periods, days, season events that affect etc. for the number of PCRs? And the reason we're asking this is just to kind of get a handle on, managing our load balancing and our processing.
Yeah, Kate, this is Clay. I'll mention that when we look at the volume by day here at the NEMSIS TAC, the volumes drop on the weekend, but are much higher on weekdays. I know that's true for sure.
Okay, that's helpful to know.
Clay, this is Mark. Do you happen to know why that would be? I mean, I don't think we have less calls on the weekend than we do during the week.
Yeah, it's really kind of an interesting pattern. I'll actually, I'll make that available to Kate. We have just kind of like a bar chart that we track over days for a year, and it's really interesting, the pattern. I'll send that on to you as well, Mark. You can take a look at it. It's an interesting effect.
That would be helpful. And, I'm kind of wondering, and this is along the lines of one of my additional questions, are the PCRs generated during a run sent in during the run, or does it get compiled in-house or by a third-party vendor before being sent to the state repositories? Because I don't know, and I don't want to assume that when they're being submitted, the timing of that.
Yeah, this is Clay again. I think we have about 10 vendors on the call. If you'd be so kind to speak up a little bit. is anybody like aggregating PCRs before sending them onto the state, or are they just all going directly into the state repositories wherever that server's at?
I think that some of them run it as batches, like overnight or something, so they don't rack up their own bandwidth bills too much. And as for why it's on the weekend, if there's an approval process or a QA process for charts, then that may not be done on the weekend because the back office staff isn't there. And there might be fewer also, routine transports on the weekend if the doctor isn't available for, dialysis or something like that.
Okay, this is all really helpful to know. Go ahead.
This is Sophia. So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We send immediately. So every record that comes in is automatically submitted, no matter what the day or time is.
Okay. Yes. Also, and I appreciate all the answers here. If any of you have additional information to share, be kind enough to send that to Clay. But this is helpful for us to kind of anticipate that some of the data is going to come in for those participating in the model will come into batches. Some of them might, the date that when they come into us, the actual PCR could have been from a previous point in time. And then some of them are going to come in and, near real time as they're being submitted to the state. So that, and how I view that is like there is somebody in the ambulance or the fire truck who is actually filling out that PCR and hitting submit.
Well, so here's another scenario that we're seeing a lot of that kind of shoots us all to heck, and that is that agencies, for whatever reason, are going in and making changes to their records, forcing old records from way back to be resent again. One agency that does about maybe 200 calls a day in the last 2 days has submitted over 20,000 records. And that's probably because they went in and they changed the status of on a record, or they did something bulk action, more than likely, that then triggered everything to be resent. And we had that happen not too long ago, and we had over 100,000 records received. So just those are all things that happen that I don't know how you can account for them.
But knowing that could happen even of itself is helpful for us to, kind of have some, as we're building, as we're working with the people who, the entities are going to collect the data, to say, you need to have some fallback. You need to be able to, and I'm going to do some cloud speak here. So it's like, hey, if you have an AWS cloud set up, if you have some standby EC2s, you need to make sure, or if you don't, you better make sure you have some to basically come online if you get all of a sudden a bulk submission. So you can manage all of that incoming traffic.
Yeah, there's generally an option to let it scale dynamically. So when you see that the server's getting loaded, then you just spin up 1 or 2 or 10 additional ones to handle the load, and they'll scale back down. So you just pay for what you use. Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of, as you were saying that's kind of where my mind was going from that piece of it, so that they can have some awareness of what is going on. And also, I think what we're, at least from the model perspective on the timing, we're going to have to especially think about that if we, even though the model starts on January 1st, if we don't start actually accepting and collecting data until July 1st, we're going to have to anticipate this anyway. So that will be a good test of our load balancing and infrastructure. So, but no, this is all really very helpful and help us kind of make sure that we're working on our preliminary designs. And so that we can also validate them as we move into this. I think one of the things, and I don't have it on here, is, oh wait, no, actually, I take that back. I asked that question at a different meeting about if there is unavailability. It's like the ability to kind of pause, and then once the connectivity is reestablished, you guys can start resending again. I'm assuming that's how it works for submitting to the state repositories. So, so the next one, and I'm going to go back up to my list. Do you have any peaks, just out of curiosity? Like, is there certain, like, you know, Super Bowl or holidays that can cause an increase in volume?
So this is California, and I'm going to ask a question that might help because we're one of the few that are self-hosted. So we have to deal with all the things you're talking about. And so one of the questions I have is, what's the problem with allowing some of these just to sit in suspense while they're being processed? I mean, there's times where I might have 20, 30,000 records pending, and then they'll just crunch through until they're all done. The problem that I think you're really going to face is some of the vendors have set up that if they don't get a response back from you, an acknowledgement within 10, 15 minutes, they turn around and send it again. And if they don't get a response, they turn around and send it again. So if your system's down or you've got a backlog, you may get the same record 6 or 7 times. And so that's an issue that I would suggest, you know, you built in some latency there to tell them, you know, don't resend if you don't get anything from us for 12 hours. Give yourself that time so you don't end up with the same thing.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, not for this, but on some different work I have done at CMS related to Marketplace or Obamacare, that was one of the things that they also were dealing with, and I'll confirm with our technical people, but I believe we're going to probably end up going through using the same Akamai setup that they had for that. So we'll have to work out that, you know, what we need to do either at the Akamai point or at other points along the way to make sure that we are handling those situations and other situations as we discover. So it's like some vendors will resend if no response in 10 to 15 minutes. Okay. I appreciate that information. That's helpful.
Kate, this is Clay too, and we certainly see those kind of volume shifts. You know, no one wants to call 911 on Christmas Day, but there's lots of calls the day after, that kind of thing. But we probably see just the larger shifts that just kind of hand them randomly. So just to let you know, from our point of view, collecting data from I think 42 states and territories now, the most we've received in a day that I can remember is just over 500,000.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful.
Is there a reason why you're not just taking some of this data directly from or augmenting the NEMSIS export that we're already sending? Because the performance of us sending out basically double the exports in some cases, or maybe contracting with a vendor who already has. I mean, I think ImageTrend has like 32 of the states. And that way we only have to submit once instead of submitting multiple times. I mean, we just get this data going over each other.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a reason, but I just thought
there is.
The obvious.
Using a vendor, the one part with that is anybody who's dealt with federal government contracting knows the joy of that. And so how long that can take and the time that we have is just not feasible. Plus, we also have other contracts in place for this work that really would prohibit us from doing, well, I shouldn't say prohibit, it would make it difficult for us to do this. the other part is that, you know, when our initial engagement, it's like and I would have to check back with Carly, who is the model lead, but I think we're potentially prohibited or limited with what NEMSIS data that we can collect is sort of like, you know, a need to know versus everything. But I'll check and I will follow up and ask that question to find out, is there a particular reason that we can't take everything?
Is your plan to pull data straight from agencies or from an aggregated state repository? I guess I'm confused.
The plan is, at this current state, is that we would accept, when the agencies are submitting data to the state repository for those participating, that we would take a subset of what they are sending to the state, subset of identified data elements.
So okay, so you'd ask the agency to send to the state and to you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
That probably eases market concerns.
Yeah. Well, it you know, it helps. There's good things about it, but then there's some challenging things about it. But that's okay. I like a good data challenge. I just wanted to like capture that piece of information. Let me see. Oh, I'm gonna go back to my questions here. So one thing that came up, as some of you may or may not know, CMS utilizes MPIs, National Provider IDs, fairly heavily, and some of the agencies and their vendors we have spoken to have said they have multiple NPIs. And I know these NPIs, part of it in this question how I may have phrased it was awkward, but I'm still kind of sinking some of this stuff in my mind. So if an agency has more than one MPI, for whatever reason, would that MPI for that particular part of the agency be associated with that PCR? So kind of how I think about it is like there's Joe Ambulance Incorporated, and Joe Ambulance has ambulance that run out of La Crosse, Wisconsin, and Stillwater, Minnesota, maybe Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Minneapolis. And each of those Joe ambulances in those locations has one or more MPIs. And so would they, when they're doing their PCRs, would they associate one of their MPIs with the PCR base, or would they just have, or is there just no association with them?
I can answer that.
The way the data set works right now, it doesn't get associated directly.
Okay.
Yeah, Dan, did you have a comment? Was that you, Dan?
Oh, same thing. I was just going to say it's tied to an agency, not a PCR.
Okay. So one of the things is which, we're kind of in the early stages and we're thinking of this, is back to, it's like we're getting a subset of the data that is being sent to the state repository. And I'm venturing into an area of IT that is not my forte, but I would expect that we would have sort of like a key or sort of like an identifier, so that when a participating agency would come to CMS and sort of knock on the door, it's like that key would be their, password or equivalent to a password to get into CMS and provide the data. And we're kind of wondering if it's one of those things where we could, as for this key, utilize the NPI of the agency, their state license ID, their state ID, and potentially their agency name as their identifier, so that when they come to the door that we know who they are. And we can say, yes, you're on the guest list. I don't know if that's how it works when you submit things to the state repository, because like I said, this is not an area of IT that I'm an expert in.
Yeah, what are the states that, this is Clay. Dan, does that seems like it might work. Do you have some kind of particular key that's associated with records coming from multiple different states and agencies? And what are you using, Dan, to develop a kind of a unique key for an agency?
And we have the IDs from the state, that are their license numbers from the state, but we're talking about basically a subset of those. So I follow the logic that each PCR should be associated with a particular NPI number, because they're doing for each run, they're doing business as a particular role or entity in that way. But I think we don't really have anything below the state license number for a particular agency, so we wouldn't be able to really sub-segment the set of PCRs easily unless there's a very like it would be some kind of custom filter there.
Yeah. We actually don't want to subset it. What we basically want to in order for help us sort of not only as a here's who's on the guest list, but help us to organize the data as well as help out with the people who are going to be looking at the data, is if we could incorporate the MPI, not actually in the WSDL itself, but maybe as part of, like I said, with like part of the identifier for the agency, so that when we get data from them, we know it's agency number, or not agency, sorry, state license number 123 and MPI 456. But it's like that comes in, and so when we're loading that data, we can use that to say, we know that this data came from this particular agency. And this is the particular MPI that we should associate with the PCRs, so that when our different contractors are looking at the data, that they know that that's that association. So if they're looking at a particular agency and their data, they can take all of the data that's associated with that agency based off of their license number and their MPI.
Sure.
I just have a quickie question. Do agencies that don't bill Medicare, because I know you talked about taking non-transporting agency PCRs as well, would they all have an MPI? And
ARPAN, keep me honest on this one. For an agency to be a participant in the model, let me see. I have to think, let me see. So if they're in the model, they need to get an MPI. And even if it's a non-Medicare transport, we're fine with that, because that's going to be used for analysis. But we really are looking for that MPI that's associated with the agency. So even if it's a non-Medicare transport, we still want that record as part of like the overall analysis that's going to be done.
So we have every agency has a unique agency ID. So if we know that the agency ID of whatever equals this MPI number. I mean, what's the problem? Because
it's not a one-to-one relationship between state license ID and MPIs, and an agency can have one or many MPIs.
So how would the user that's completing the PCR, if they work for an agency and they're out in the field, how would they identify this one goes to this one MPI, this one goes to this one? I mean, I don't know how they would.
Yeah, I mean, and I think part of it was because how I've been kind of thinking about it, and this is going to be a more in-depth conversation, is if the agency is participating in the model, that potentially what they could do, since they're going to have to peel off a subset of data, is that when they peel off that subset, they append their MPI ID to it. Because it's the records for the agency. So it's like if they have multiple MPIs, whichever MPI that they want to use and they want CMS to receive is the one that they would append.
So this really is unique to those that are going to participate, and we don't know who those are going to be yet. So until we know that, we don't even know what vendors could be involved with it either. So this is kind of a parking lot.
Yeah, this is Dan again. So another approach that you could take is you're gonna, at some point when before an agency starts sending you data, you'll have to set up credentials for the web service. And what you could do is gather this information up front for that agency and store it on your side. And then vendors wouldn't have to kind of bastardize the current NEMSIS web service to include MPI. You would just ask for it up front.
Okay, that is helpful. Again, like I prefaced this, this is not like an area of my expertise. So it's helpful because one of the things which is challenging around the MPIs is that there is from NPES, which is the system, they have, and do not say this one fast because it gets really muddled, a NPI API. But last I had heard that the data that API sits on top of is about 4 months old. So even if we checked against for that agency, but they may have not gotten it into that database at the time. So it's kind of like if we check, we don't know which, and they could have multiple MPIs, and we don't know if they have one that they've got that they want us to specifically, or they're specifically using for this model, or is the one that we're of interest in.
And there is in the NEMSIS web service already a field for organization. We usually put the state license number in there, but I don't think there's anything that would prevent you from asking for the MPI number in that field. Okay. If this is a thing that NEMSIS, or that could be addressed in the NEMSIS set, then we could put that on the roadmap if that's identifying a business unit that this PCR came from. So it's from this agency and this business unit within the agency, which has a separate business NPI number.
Okay. I think at this point in time, the information that I've received is really, really helpful. But I even expect that when we are having this conversation that we'll have to potentially have this more than once, just because it's a little muddy and convoluted yet. And, even the answers that you give, I might go back and think about it and go, I have more questions. So this is sort of like, I see a work in progress just between the timing of when we would have access, the MPI information that CMI could obtain from CMS internally, and the age of it, what's in the agency data, and then also what the participating agencies have. There might be a disconnect just based off of timing. Because my understanding is when you apply for an MPI, and once you get that number, that is really fairly quick. But when that number gets perpetuated out to other areas, that timing can be really slow. So that's kind of one of the nuts I'm trying to crack. But I will definitely would be very happy to come back and talk to you guys about cracking that nut.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much it'll even come up for your pilot project, since it's pretty uncommon to have multiple ones, but it is out there.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it mentioned, it was in one of the other calls that we had, you know, courtesy of Clay and Company, that, you know, there was, you know, it was brought up that there's agencies that have multiple MPIs. So one of those things that we'll have to figure out, you know, how to work through. But this is all very helpful.
Quick question on, is it possible that we simply tie the credentials to the NPI number, and we send from each individual NPI-based organization to a different, to the same web service via different credentials?
That potentially could be, you know, could be a way to do it. What I'm gonna be looking at is, the first thing was finding out, can this be done? The answer to that yes is yes, it can be done. But then the how of it, once we get to that point of it, I would really like to come back and maybe potentially have a working session, as if possible, with you know, people on this call and others, to talk through what would be the best way to do that, enable for CMI to capture that information as well, and just use it to, you know, associate the data that comes in with the appropriate agency. So I have two more questions, and I think we're actually a bit over, and one of them is, and actually, Clay, it's about the e-patient. If that's something that maybe you can answer or somebody can answer offline, I would appreciate it. The other one actually came up during this meeting, so it piqued my interest, was do any third-party vendors, agencies, or NEMSIS use HL7 fire servers?
And fire kind of in preliminary stages right now. There's a lot of talk about it, but not very many implementations.
Okay, so in preliminary stages, but no implementation. Preliminary stages, but
yeah, there's basically no servers for us to connect to.
Okay. Oh, because there's no servers to connect to?
Right. The standard in general hasn't been broadly released or finalized.
Okay.
Yeah, Kate, this is Clay. We're facing the same thing, trying to determine whether we go to HL7 Fire, and we're hearing back that there's just not wide implementation yet among hospitals and others.
Okay. Clay, would you mind sharing that with me? Because I would like to share that internally with parts of CMS that is working with the fire, the fire standards and stuff, and see if they have any insight or anything that they could potentially share back with you.
You bet. You bet. Happy to do that, Kate.
Okay. We should all benefit from this engagement.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Well, that is it for what I have this time around, and I really do, again, appreciate you inviting us to this meeting, as well as indulging the questions.
You bet. Thank you, Kate. Appreciate that. Julianne,
Okay.
I'll turn it back over to you to end the call.
Okay, did we have anything from the Office of EMS NHTSA?
No, ma'am, we're good, thank you.
All right, excellent. Are there any issues that participants on this call would like to bring up in an open forum? So our next meeting is September 11th, same time, same place. Please let us know if there's anything that you would like added to the agenda to be discussed among this group. We really appreciate your participation, taking time out of your busy days, and we appreciate your participation in these conversations. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a fabulous day.
Thank you.